So the question is, what's your opinion on vim-wiki? Um, I I looked at vim-wiki pretty seriously about 6 years ago, I want to say. Um, Usually things like this were brought to my attention back when I was doing SkillSec, and I had, a bunch of really pedantic, amazing, wonderful people that I helped to mentor. To use one of their terms for themselves, a protege. I think that word is a little bit too highfalutin, but anyway, so they would say, "Yeah, why aren't you doing this and that and that, blah blah blah," and they brought my attention to vim-wiki, and then I was like, "Well, okay, well let's first of all let's look at this." So the first thing to think about it with vim-wiki is this is what it looks like, right? It's a totally different syntax. It's not at all Markdown compatible at all. It's similar enough to look like it, but it's not compatible. I've done a lot of stuff for wiki. So in 2000 and I want to say 9. In 2009, I organized all of the documentation for my team at IBM, and we made a wiki. And I got really into media wiki syntax and all that other stuff. And all I can remember is that I couldn't get anybody else to do it because it was such an uphill climb to learn MediaWiki. So, we can make a whole video about why Markdown is better. And now just the TLDR on Markdown. Markdown was invented by some writers. It was by John Gruber and Aaron Schwartz, who were writers in, I think, 2007 or so. And they created it because they were sick and tired of writing HTML, which was a disaster. HTML is a huge, huge disaster. It should never have been created. It should have been something more akin to Markdown if we wanted to have everybody participate instead of just the coders or the people who are using, gatekeeping the content production by writing the applications that allow them to do it, which is totally lame. And I know that that's a hot take. I don't care. HTML was a disaster. It was totally bad. It's still bad. And the web is just a perfect example of that. So we had an opportunity to do it right. And the way to do it right was Markdown, right? So this is a question about MediaWiki, but it's related to Markdown because Markdown is the simplest, most universal way to do that. Now, I know there's a million versions of Markdown and stuff, and JGM, who made Pandoc, and a bunch of people have been pushing for Common Mark, and now we've got GitHub Flavor Markdown that's got support for MathJax and LaTeX and all this great stuff. And I believe the closest thing to a universal knowledge syntax that we can possibly hope to achieve as humans at this point is something very close to GitHub Flavor Markdown. Why? And this gets into the advantages of not using vim-wiki. I don't like wikis in general, by the way, because wikis are just stupid. Wikis, everybody's fighting with each other when they're writing a wiki. If you're on the same team, at best you all write, but you have a different voice and it's not the same author. I don't like that entire approach to knowledge management personally. I think it would be rather to have a singular voice in your knowledge management and then have multiple people have different pieces of it. But that's a separate topic we can get into. But if you write it in vim-wiki, first of all, you can't just put it on GitHub and have it work and have it be clickable. You can't just go there and have it be rendered properly because it's not standard, right? It's the same reason I don't like all these other possible things. There's like 5 or 6 different, you can readme.md, read the docs, I mean, I don't even know them all. There's like so many of them. I'm like, can we just agree on one? I know some people like Chris Nova, who I deeply respect, really, really love ASCII doc. I hate it. For the same reasons I hate HTML. It's too complicated. I'm not going to write myself. Everybody's like, well, just write your stuff in LaTeX. Oh, really? You're going to tell the non-technical people in the world that they should just learn LaTeX and get over it if they want to publish a book. I hate it. I hate the fact that knowledge management is gatekept behind these really complicated syntaxes. And so KegML, which I'm going to make a push for, Keg Markup Language, is a really, really simplified. I'm writing in it right now. It's a really, really simplified version of even Markdown, right? Because there's just too many. When there's the one thing that the Markdown people did that were wrong, I think, was kind of inspired by the Perl thing. Is there's like an infinite number of ways to write different things. Like, for example, horizontal rule. There is literally an infinite number of ways to do that, and that's really horrible for parsing and consistency and teaching and all that stuff. It's best to just find one best way to do that, 4 dashes in that case, and just go for it. So this is back to vim-wiki. So vim-wiki is yet another thing that got thrown at us that is not, it's just close enough to Markdown to make us annoyed, but not really the real thing. So that's why I don't like it. Bottom line. And, it takes a plugin and everything. Why not just write it in Markdown and use Vim as is and not even need a plug down? I mean, any other thing, you know? And so Markdown is supported in GitHub, is supported everywhere else. vim-wiki is not. And why not just use Markdown? So that's the short version of it. This video is pretty much over at that point. You know, so that's the reason. And that's it. I mean, you know, this is what I don't like too. So it has bold text and it has italic text. You can't use underscores. You can't use, listen, GitHub learned the hard way that you can't use underscores for this. So in Markdown and in KGML, use two asterisks. Why? Because too often there are underscores that are identifiers. And so then you don't know whether you wanted to just italicize that little part of the middle of the word, which is something you want to do when you're writing. Sometimes you want to, you know, have, by the way, what does italics mean? What does I mean? What does I mean HTML5? It's not italic. It means intonation. It means change in tone. It means inflect, right? And putting that inside of a word, if you're doing linguistics course manual for something like that, that's a really, really common use of it. That's something that would you'd see in a novel. Somebody would want to put italics around some middle piece of a word, right? Well, you can't do it because you can't tell the difference between that and identifier. It's like a million of these little teeny tiny, you know, 1,000 cuts of death that come from getting all of these things wrong. And I mean, and it lets you like do numbered lists with A, B and all this stuff. And it lets you like do this, which is totally different. There's already 3 backticks for that. In other words, they just made for no reason at all. They decided to make yet another version of Markdown rather than going with the, you know, long established standards. And it just, if I sound annoyed, it's because I am. I have been fighting my entire career as an educator and as a writer to get some semblance of simplicity so that we can have more people just taking notes and just thinking about the content and not this you know, even 30 minutes is too long to learn how to write, right? I mean, unless you're going to be doing math stuff. And we have some people, by the way, who've already started doing KEG, have been showing off their things, and they're already using like textbook quality math symbols and stuff because they're using, you know, LaTeX and MathJax and KTech or whatever you want to call it. So those are all the things that I prefer to vim-wiki. That's really it. There's just too many other standardized better things out there. That's why I don't even look at vim-wiki. And I'll stop there.